Do you think we're heading in that direction?
In a Total Recall direction, or
Like all of these cyberpunk futures.
oh yeah, most definitely. I think you hit the nail on the head when you whenever you say that we're heading into a cyberpunk like kind of like future. We're definitely heading into like a dystopic, like connect your brain into the cybernetics kind of future. And whether good or bad, like there's certainly a lot of good things with that, but there's going to be a lot of bad things with that. Something that I've always felt strongly about, that I've talked about over the years, and I've mentioned to you earlier, is coronal mass ejections. But there's a specific scenario that I have in my head that if a coronal mass ejection were to happen on a cyberpunk dystopic society, it would go way worse than I think what even we think is possible. So like given like if hundreds of or millions of people decide to put like chips in their head, what could potentially happen is if a coronal mass ejection fires out and hits Earth, all those people with chips in their heads could immediately fry. Same thing with pacemakers. No offense to anybody that has a pacemaker. That sucks. You need it to survive. But if there was a coronal mass ejection, that pacemaker could literally fry inside of you. It'll happen to anybody with any kind of cybernetics or anything inside of them. Their entire left or right half of their body could just stop working. All of a sudden, just they could fall down and not be able to use half their body. And at that point, I think they would just shut down. No pun intended.
But what if by this time in the future, the planet is covered in an array of satellites that form some sort of field that can protect us from these?
I don't know if there's enough satellites that you can form as an array or a field that would protect us from a coronal mass ejection, especially one that's big enough to touch our atmosphere like that. It would literally fry everything. There was something in the 1800s called the Carrington event, and from what I remember reading about, it was this event where there was a coronal mass ejection, a solar flare, a really big solar flare from the sun. And what it did is we had all these telegraph wires or telegram wires around the United States. We had almost no electronics at all. But from what I was reading about, it completely fried all the telegraph wires around like the world. Literally any slight little tiny little bit of electronic thing that we had at this time, which was not much, got fried, and if I'm not mistaken, even potentially caught on fire. So imagine the level of energy it takes to do that, to set something on fire. And yeah, sure, maybe we'll have satellites around there, but what I think will happen is those satellites will just get hit with a wave of radiation and just fall out of the sky. And by this time, what we'll have to worry about is coronal mass ejections or solar flares happening, causing satellites to just right out of the sky. I think that's going to be a major issue one day. And I saw a number, I think it was today or yesterday, and it was the number of satellites in the sky just in the past 20 years has risen so much, and we have thousands of satellites in the sky. So many. It's crazy. But imagine all those just coming down at once. Imagine planes falling from the sky because of a solar flare that just happens out of nowhere. It's scary.
Hmm. Do you think we should just go underground?
I see where you're going with this, but I don't know. I feel like I don't think we should go underground, but I think we should know our limits. I think we shouldn't test our boundaries so much and test our limits, and we should have common sense. I think and I love the age that we're living in because there's so many countless boundaries that we can explore like in human nature, in society, in everything. There's so many different things that we can explore on a basic level that can help society and that can push us further and further and further. And I think with all of those stars in our eyes, so to speak, we start to almost lose sight of things that can be common sense that we've experienced before, that one day we're going to experience again, and it's going to, because of all this stuff that we've built up around it, that we put no safety pins around because we've never experienced it in our lifetime. One day it could just come and just take us out, or just rob us of something that we have. Like, we could be sent into the dark ages again for like a couple months and maybe even years because of something like this happening, and that would be crazy. Maybe you know where this is going, maybe you don't. But here's a hypothetical for you. Let's say tomorrow we find out that dragons were actually real. They were real things, like down to a T, fire-breathing dragons that could fly around, like as real as the driven snow. Like, let's say
How could they breathe fire? How?
I don't know, but let's just say biologically they figure it out. Like, maybe it's, you know how there's those bugs that can shoot out sulfur? Maybe it's something like that where it can generate like some kind of sulfur vomit or something like that. I don't know. But let's say hypothetically we find out tomorrow that dragons are real, and then the first thing they want to do, the first thing that they say they want to do with that information and that DNA that they've acquired, is they want to clone all the dragons that they can, and they want to open up a park of all cloned dragons. Do you think that would be a good idea? Do you think cloning dragons would be a good idea? You think cloning dragons would be genuinely a good idea? I don't think that would be a good idea. I think we should clone dinosaurs before we clone dragons. And that being said, a dragon would just be a dinosaur, but I think we'd have a better chance cloning most other dinosaurs than cloning a dragon.
I think if we can clone a dragon, we should be making a King Kong.
We should be making a King Kong?
Yeah.
Yeah, but then we're just creating fictional creatures at that point. You know that they want to clone, or not clone, but like they want to genetically engineer a unicorn, right? That's something I was going to mention earlier. You heard that, right? Yeah.
I heard that.
That's crazy. That's essentially, that's playing God now. If we're making a real King Kong, we've passed the point of like, now we're just playing God. Like, bringing back things to life, you know what I mean? We thought that was, playing God, taking an animal out of extinction. That is playing God. But actually creating things in the image that we created them in is the literal definition of a godlike behavior. And I think if we do that, if we start cloning we start genetically engineering mythological creatures to be real, I think we'll get into a really bad gray area. I think the idea of genetically engineering a unicorn, a horse with a head on it, it's a whimsical, it's a funny idea, but it's really knocking on something really almost deadly, like it's not knocking on something good. You know what I mean? It's knocking on some dangerous territory. If we start creating all these mythological creatures, let's say dragons are not real completely not real. But let's say tomorrow we decide to take some kind of alligator or lizard DNA, like just a bunch of lizard DNA, and combine it with some dinosaur DNA and create our own version of like a dragon. I don't think that's a good idea.
Right, so I
think that is a bad idea. I think that's what they're trying to do with the unicorn too. They're trying to take all this different DNA and create this different thing that they think not existed, but they want to exist.
Why not?
I don't think it's a good idea.
Let's make these mythical creatures that are in our stories. Let's
So
become
let's
the
just
gods of our own
genetically
story.
engineer Bigfoot. What's the issue with that? Right?
Exactly. Unless he's sentient, and then we need to like meet that.
But that's what I was just going to say is that Bigfoot might be a link between humanity and an ape. And if we create something that is that close to a human being, is that right? Should we be creating things that are half human, half ape, half half human, half dog? You know what I mean? Should we be creating these like and that's what scientists
We
want to
would be
do. They're
the Anunnaki.
talking about it. But that's what I'm saying. And that's not a good thing. I don't like that. I don't like that future. I don't want a future where we decide that we fall in love with our dog, so we decide to make human dog hybrids in a lab for this weird woman who fell in love with her dog. You know what I mean? I don't want this shit. I don't want to grow up with some dude whose name's Scruffy and who looks like he's got a bunch of patches of fur and looks
Some
all
guy named Brian.
freak. Some guy named what?
Brian.
Yeah, some guy named Brian who drinks all day and, you know, spouts off about his political agenda and talks about a book that he's always writing but never finishes. I don't want to deal with these people in my life. I deal with that enough in my own life because I already have those problems. I'm not an alcoholic, but I constantly talk about books that I'm never going to finish. This is a
Can
real
you
issue.